Hi, my name is James Catherall, founder of Catherall Audio, and in this video I'm going to show you how to set up backing tracks in MainStage using the Playback plugin. This is great for any type of solo performers or anyone else that wants to have any type of backing track with them. If maybe they only play maybe the keys or the guitar and they want to be able to have a full track with them as they're performing. This is also really great if you want to have any type of atmospheric or pads or textural kind of things that are just kind of sustaining underneath as maybe you're talking or playing or doing anything of that nature. I've also created a free template that you can use to set up your backing tracks, and I'll have a link for that in the description below. So let's get started with setting it up. First part of this is going to take place in Logic Pro. Here's my Logic project with all of my stems. This is just a royalty-free song that I downloaded off the internet just so I don't have to worry about any copyrights or anything like that. The first thing I need to do is make sure the tempo is set up correctly. So I've determined that this song is 95 beats per minute. So I made sure that my Logic project was set to 95 beats per minute. The other thing I've done in here is created markers up here at the top. And these all label the different sections of my song. So I created these markers just by pushing Option and then apostrophe. And you can see that created a marker right there. And then I can push Shift apostrophe and I can name that marker. Once you have that done, you can do one of two things. You can bounce all of this as one track together, or you can bounce it as stems. So in the template that I created, I have it set up so that you can do a multi-track stem sort of setup. So I'm going to bounce each of these individually. I'm going to start here at the top and push Command B, and here's my bouncing prompt. Couple things in here. You can do this as either a WAV or an AIFF file, and then you just want to make sure you select your bit depth and your sample rate. For this project, I'm going to do 24-bit, and then I'm going to do 44.1K for my sample rate. One other thing in here that's super important is down here at the bottom left where it says include tempo information. You want to make sure you have that checked. That's going to be really important later, and you'll see why when we're loading these into the Playback plugin. Now that we have everything done and bounced out of Logic, we're going to move over to MainStage. So I've set up a template that has 8 tracks in it, so you can do some multi-track setup just like I had done in Logic. One more thing to preface before we get into the MainStage template as well. This is all set up using the Korg Nano Control 2. So if you have this, in theory, it should just be plug and play. I did my best to keep all the button assignments as intuitive as I could because not all of these are correlated with everything you want to do inside of the Playback plugin, but I'll also have an image at the bottom of the screen that'll kind of point out some of the buttons and how they're connected to this MainStage template. If you don't have the Korg Nano Control 2, I would highly suggest getting one. It's super affordable. I picked that one up for $75 off of Amazon. It's a great thing to have if you're doing playback and backing tracks, or even just in general if you're using MainStage or Logic Pro or any type of DAW. It's a great MIDI controller to have. So here's the MainStage template. Looks like there's a lot going on. I'll break down all of it piece by piece as we go through it. First thing we're going to start with is here on the right side. Here's all of our tracks. I've loaded up 8 instances of the Playback plugin for our 8 backing tracks. The project that I used only has 5, so I've already loaded those in and labeled them. If we open up the Playback plugin here for track number 1, here's the interface. It has a very skeuomorphic type of design. It looks like an actual tape player with this blue area being that tape. We can see the waveform of the audio file that I loaded in. And then there's a bunch of other things here. But first we're going to start at the top right where it says File. This is where I'm going to load in my audio file. If I click on that, it's going to take me to my Finder. And this is where I'm going to navigate to those audio files that I bounced out. So I already have it here, but maybe you put it to your desktop or somewhere else. I'm going to go to that, and then I'm going to click on the one I want to load, and then I'll click Open. Once I've done that, you should see it pop up right here. So I'm going to resize this a little bit so that I can pull it down to the bottom and we can kind of see both things working at the same time. So to start with just sort of the straightforward one, I have the play button up here that I can push on my Nano Control. And we hear it's going to start playing back our track. And I can push the play button again to make it stop. The other thing we've done and why we set up those markers in the Logic project. I have 2 buttons here on the Nano Control that I've set up here at the top of the template to do previous marker and next marker. Because we exported it with that tempo information, it keeps all of that saved. When I load it in here, it'll also load in those markers for me. So I can navigate through those different markers by pushing these buttons. And it's going to take me through them. Other thing I can do is I have this fade out. So if I push play, and then if I push stop, Instead of stopping immediately, it'll fade out over time. And I can see that down here where it says fade time. Right now it's default set to 2 seconds, but I can pull that up or down to make that as long or as short as I want it. Other thing I can do is just push the play button. And then if I push the play button again, then it's just going to stop wherever it is immediately. So doing some of those things can be helpful, mainly for rehearsal purposes, is being able to move through these different markers so you can maybe work on a specific part of the song with the group or just by yourself. And then you can push the play and stop just to make sure it stops right away. Or you can do the fade out, which might be better for a performance. If you want the song to slowly fade out wherever it is, you can just push that stop. If maybe it's a really long sort of atmospheric type of thing you have going on, it'll just slowly fade out instead of unnaturally just stopping wherever it is. Now let's go through some of the tempo parts of this and talk about how all of this is synced together. So remember back in the Logic project, we made sure we had it set to 95 beats per minute and we exported the tempo information. So we can see down here, it has that 95 BPM. And that's because if I go to the patch and then I look at the attributes, I've checked 2 boxes here. I have the time signature. So the song that I bounced out was in 4/4 and the song was at 95 beats per minute. And now down here at the bottom left of the Playback plugin, I have sync turned on and then I have it snapping to the bar. So now when I push play, it's going to be syncing with the MainStage clock to make sure it all plays together and it plays on the MainStage grid. You'll notice when I push play, it doesn't always start right away. You notice I pushed play and it was maybe a second or two before it started. And that'll make sense when we turn on the MainStage click. So I have it set to this button on the Nano Control 2. I'm going to turn on the click so we can hear that. That's MainStage's clock going right now. And if I push play, it waited until it got to beat 1 of the MainStage clock before it started the track, just to make sure that everything is synced together by the bar. And that's going to happen whether you can hear the clock going or not. It's always going in the background, and MainStage is always syncing everything to that clock. So now let's talk about how all of the multi-tracks are synced together. Because if you notice, the only thing I have open right now is the guitar audio file, but all of the audio files are playing when I push play. And that's because here at the bottom right, I've set all of them to the same group. So all of them are put in group 1. And what that means is all of the different playback instances that are in the same group are going to operate together. If I didn't have them in the same group and I pushed play, then all of them would start in whatever random places they might be. So I want to make sure they're all in the same group. So that way, if I'm moving through the markers or if I'm pushing play and stopping them, anything like that, it's going to do it to all of the other playback instances that are in the same group. So that way I can have up to 8 tracks. I can have more. I mean, I can load it basically as many as my computer can handle. I just went with 8 as a pretty standard 8-track type of setup, but that allows you to sync all of them together so that you can have more control over your different tracks. The other thing that's really cool if you sync it all to the MainStage clock is you can easily change the tempo of your track. So right now it's set to 95 beats per minute, but I can change this down here where it says change tempo to. I can bump this up to something else like 111, and you can see it's changed here in the Playback plugin. The other thing we'll want to do before I push play is up here at the top right where you see the gear. I'm going to click that, and then we have flex mode. So this is going to be using that same sort of flex algorithm that's set up inside of Logic. And this is what MainStage uses to stretch and change the tempo of the song without affecting the pitch. So I usually set this to polyphonic, and that gives me the best results when I'm doing something like this. So now if I push play, it changed the tempo of my song and made it faster. And you can tell that it actually does a pretty good job of making it sound natural and not really making it all messed up and adding a bunch of artifacts. And I can do the same thing in the other direction as well. I'm going to double click. I can set this to 80, and now I'll push play. And you can tell it actually did a pretty good job of stretching that out without adding a lot of clicks or pops or other types of artifacts to the sound, even though we changed that by a whole 15 beats per minute. So that's a pretty big change while still being able to maintain the fidelity of the audio. So this is just something you can use if maybe you want to play a song at a slightly different tempo. You don't want to be stuck at a certain tempo all the time. You can move things up and down, or even just for practicing reasons with your band, is you can pull the tempo up or down and it'll stretch it for you and still make it sound as best as it can. Now, let's take a look at some of the other things inside of this interface. If you look over here at the far left, this button is going to play the track from the very beginning. So I have that also set up on the Nano control. You see right here where it says top. That button is mapped to that button in the interface. So if I press that here on my Nano control, it jumped back to the beginning of the song. Now let's take a look at some of the other things. Right here is the cycle button. I do have that set up as well on the Nano control to turn on the cycle. Only issue with the cycle is if you have markers on your audio file like I do, then it's only going to cycle within whatever marker it's on. So right now it's on the intro. As soon as it gets to the end of the intro marker, it's going to cycle back to the beginning of the intro marker, and it's only going to go through that over and over again. If you don't have any markers, it's just going to do the entire audio file over and over again, which would honestly be a little bit more beneficial. And that'd be nice if you could change that on the cycle, that if you do have markers, you can still cycle the entire song if you want to. That way you could turn it into maybe like a loop or something like that, so it just keeps going over and over again, and you can just play on top of that. But for right now, all you can do is either have no markers so it can cycle the whole thing, or you can have markers and it'll only cycle within a certain marker. Next, keep going through here. This middle area is just all of the tempo and timing type of stuff. This tells you what bar and beat you're currently on in your audio track, and you can see the playhead is here in the middle, so that's going to tell you where it is. This gives you the entire length of the audio file that you loaded. So this one is 65 bars and 3 beats long. This is the tempo that I have set up in my MainStage clock. So it's at 4/4 and 95 beats per minute. This is the fade time that we talked about. And then here's the pitch, where you can change the tuning of this audio file by semitones or by cents. And here's some of the other buttons that I already have mapped in this template connected to my Nano control. So here's the fading out button. So if you click this, it's going to fade out the song like I already demonstrated. Next, we have the count in button, and this will give you a count in from the metronome anytime you push play on the song. And that'll have it going even if you have the click off. It'll still play this count in, and then it'll just turn off the metronome as soon as the audio starts. So we can see that now. If I turn on the count in, I don't have the click on, but I push play. So you can hear that. It just starts wherever the clock is at that moment. And then as soon as you hear the next beat 1, you can count 4 from there, and then it'll start the audio. And then here's the click button that we already showed. So this just turns on the metronome inside of MainStage. And then these are our marker navigation buttons that we can use to move between the different markers inside of our Playback plugin. One more thing before we close out of here, I'm going to go up to this gear at the top. We also have 2 different options for playing. So outside of my Nano control, if you also have a keyboard that you want to use, you can use the start with play action, and that's going to actually follow this global play button that's here inside of MainStage that you can either press right there, or you can press your space bar on your keyboard, and that will also start the audio in the Playback plugin. Or you can have it start on a patch or set change. So that means as soon as you go to that patch or set, it's going to automatically start the audio for that song. So maybe it seems like a pretty specific type of use case, but if that is something that you want to happen, you can turn that on right there so that it happens every time. Now I'm going to close out of this and let's look at some of the other areas inside of this template. So if you've already downloaded our other MainStage template, this will have some familiar things in there, as well as some of the additions for the backing tracks. Here on the left is your patch list. That'll correlate with everything that you load here. So this would be all of your different songs. Up here at the top left is the number of the patch that you're on. So we're on patch number 1 right now. And then this is the name of the patch that we're on. So I just gave it a generic name of song 1. And then here's our panic button and our patch advance buttons. So I'm going to map that to my MIDI controller rather than to the Nano Control 2. And here's the output fader and the output levels. Now, some of the new stuff. This is listing all of my different markers in my song. So I have my intro and verse 1 and bridge, and I can click on these and it will also jump to that part of the song. The other thing that's cool too with the playback plugin, in layout mode, you can add a waveform that correlates with that playback plugin. So you can see this is showing me the waveform where it's currently at in the plugin. And then we just have to remember that in the playback plugin, the playhead is in the center. So in all of these, the center is where it's playing from, not the left side, which might be what you might think of by default, is that the left side is what's being played. It's actually playing from the middle of this waveform. And then from there, across the top is all of the different buttons that we've talked about. If you want to dig into this template, there's a lot of different things that you can map these things to. Like if I go to play/stop and I look at that, there's actually a bunch of different options that you can choose from to do current marker, play or stop from the current position, from the start of the song, from the relative position, all these different things that you can play around with if you want to try something different rather than just current marker. I set it to that because that's the one that I like using the best. Same thing with this button that says top. This is going to play from the start of the song. So you can also change that if you want to try something different. And then here with fade, I have it stopping with fade out. You can also change that just to have it stop immediately rather than fading out if you want that to happen. And then plus some of these other ones. You can always just change the text of these and map these buttons to whatever you want. These are just the ones that I felt like would be the most useful to use with backing tracks. One other thing you can do for customization, if I go here to layout mode, and then I click on these, I've hid the ruler. You can turn the ruler on if you want. It just takes up some of that vertical real estate inside of the waveform, and it's already pretty small. But if that is something that you want, you can turn the ruler on and it'll show you the bar numbers and it'll show you the marker that you're on. So as I move through this, it'll also update with each of those. Or you can go back to layout mode and hide the ruler. Just more things that you can customize if you want to. From there, we have our 8 tracks here in the middle. I once again have set this up to sort of mirror my Nano Control 2. So we have a solo and a mute button for each of our 8 backing tracks that goes along with my Nano Control 2's solo and mute buttons, plus a fader, and I can move these up and down on my Nano Control 2. And I like that because it just gives you a little bit more mixing control in a live setting based off of the venues you're in. You might want the drums to be a little bit stronger and punchier. And so when you're playing the song, you can pull the drums up in real time and it'll make it louder, and it just makes it quick and easy. So you don't have to fiddle around in a bunch of plugins. You just have your Nano Control in front of you and you can live mix as the song is going and as you're playing. And then same thing for those mute buttons. If maybe you have a drummer that hops in or something like that, and normally you're just a keys player, or maybe you're a singer and you can go, oh, we have a drummer this time. I'm just going to mute that drum track. And there, now the drum track is muted. If I push play, let's go back a marker so we can hear it. Now that drum track is gone. Or I can unmute it, or I can mute it and it's gone. So it just gives us a little bit more control over what's happening in real time. You can also overwrite the names of these when you're loading in your audio files. So these will be by default just labeled 1 through 8. And then you can go here and you can do override parent setting, or you can just click on it and type in something new. Like maybe this is a vocal track for your number 1, so you can change it to Vox. I'm just going to leave it as guitar though, because that's what mine is. I also have a keyboard in here just because, you know, I kind of assumed in MainStage, one of its best things is being able to use it as a keyboard performance software. So put a keyboard in there so that you can always have your keyboard ready to do any type of synth sounds or anything like that to play along with your backing tracks. The other cool thing, we look over here, we talked about these different markers in the song. So this will also update with each song that you go through. So when I go to song number 2, you'll see that it'll update automatically. And these are all of the markers in this new song that I have listed. So that just makes it convenient. It also changes tempo because this is a different tempo song that I have. So now it's going to update all of that so it'll stay in time with this song. So I can push play here. And that's my new song. So one final thing to go with this, I have it set up to sync with MainStage's internal clock. And that's really convenient if your song stays the same tempo. You can also add in your own click track if you want to. So let's talk about how to do that. We're gonna go back into Logic Pro. And here I've added a click track to this song. I just loaded up the orchestral kit. That's just a stock Logic sample library. I really like using the woodblock sound, so let's listen to that. So that gives you the ability to have different pitches to show the phrasing of the song. So this one's in 4/4, so it has a high pitch on beat 1, and then the rest of the beats are a low pitch. And now you can bounce that out separately, and then you'll do the same thing. So I want to include the tempo information, hit OK. I'm going to put this into song 1 stems, and I'm going to call this click, and then it's going to bounce that out. Now back in MainStage, I'm going to load this onto track number 8. Open Playback, go to File, make sure it's on song 1 stems, and then load the click, hit open. Now we have that click track loaded. We can listen to that really quick. There we go. Now we have our own custom click track going inside of the Playback plugin. So now you can turn off the sync if you want to, so it won't have that little delay at the beginning. It would just start instantly rather than following the MainStage clock. That can also be convenient if you're playing with a song that has more tempo fluctuations or tempo changes. Since you can't really do that in an easy way inside of MainStage using its clock, you can have your own that it would follow along with. And that's how you set up backing tracks inside of MainStage. So once again, this template will be downloadable in the link down below. It is set up with the Nano Control 2, so it can be a little bit easier to plug and play if you already own that. Or you can also customize that, and this can just give you a little bit of a jumping off point to help you build your own backing track setup. If you found this video helpful, I'd really appreciate it if you give it a like, hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next one.